Can we have an honest conversation about jury duty? Jury duty is something most of us don't want to do, but it's something we are forced to do as part of our civic duty in the U.S. It's like paying taxes and filing tax returns each year. Most of us hate paying taxes and filing tax returns, but we do it anyway. We have a legal and moral obligation to show up when called for jury duty, but I don't think we have any moral or legal obligation to do anything more than the minimum requirements. The first time I was called to jury duty was when I was 21. Despite my young age and reasons I gave as to why I shouldn't be on the jury, I was selected anyway. So on my very first call to jury duty, I was drafted to become a juror. Can you believe that? I became a juror in a civil trial involving medical malpractice. When I served, I found jury duty to be an unpleasant experience. The primary reason why it was so tough for me is that I was sleep deprived at the time. Every morning, I was forced to show up in court to listen to the case being presented. And at that time, I was going to college part-time and I was working full-time. I had a full schedule in addition to being forced into jury duty. But nevertheless, I did what I was supposed to do. I was forced to go to court and sit in the jury box, sleep deprived for several days to hear lawyers present their case. And I am embarrassed to say I nodded off a few times during the trial. My mind glazed over many times also. I hated it because I was so tired every morning. To this day, I don't remember much about that trial, I'm sad to say. At the time, I was confused about why the lawyers selected me to be on the jury because I was so young and inexperienced. But looking back, I now know why. In the last dozen years, I've been called for jury duty a few times. But today, lawyers never select me to be on the jury, and I hope to keep it that way. So why are lawyers not selecting me for jury duty anymore? First, let me be clear. I'm not a lawyer, so what I tell people of how to get out of jury duty is from a non-lawyer perspective, and certainly not any kind of legal or professional advice. It is also not a guarantee that it will work for everyone or for every case, but it has worked for me for many years. You will have to adapt what I tell you to your personality and circumstances. Second, I want to be clear. I am not telling anyone to lie or be mistruthful in how they respond, but there are nuances in how to communicate. Third, if you have legal acceptable reasons to get out of jury duty, don't be shy about it. Use those reasons. Don't make it any harder than you have to if you don't want to serve jury duty and have good, valid reasons for it. For example, if you're a single parent, head of household, and the sole provider of dependent children, serving on a jury can cause you undue hardship. You should speak out. Or if you have medical reasons that would make it risky for you to sit for hours in a courtroom, you should speak out. If you are a senior citizen over 70, you might also be allowed to get out of jury duty if you want. Feel free to use any of the acceptable predefined reasons to get out of jury duty if you don't want to serve on a jury. A reason that I definitely can't give any court to get out of jury duty is that I have a demanding cat named Jaggy, who absolutely insists that I tell you to swipe that like button to help spread word of this video. And as a special bonus, if you hit that subscribe button, he will get a special treat. Sometimes you can provide good reasons why you can't go do jury duty prior to the appointment date. You should contact the court as soon as possible if you can't show up. Your appointment date can be changed and moved if necessary. Keep in mind that administrative procedures for jury duty will vary from state to state, county to county, and court to court. So you will have to be flexible and adapt a bit. But if you do have to show up for jury duty, you will then check in with the court clerks to mark your attendance. You will likely be given another opportunity to give reasons why you shouldn't serve on a jury. Under the right circumstances, you can be dismissed and go home. However, if you're like me, who's self-employed, I have no dependents, no extreme medical issues, and no personal or family emergencies, it's nearly impossible for me to get out of jury duty. I have to show up and check in because I am one of these people who have no good reasons to not show up for jury duty. Whatever your appointment date and time, you will have to check in and wait on the judge and lawyers on the case to get situated before they are ready for you and your fellow juror candidates to go into voir dire. Voir dire is the process when lawyers interview, question, and screen potential jurors for the case. This is done in a group setting. The court swears you in. After short introduction and instructions by the judge, the lawyers will interview and question you and potential jurors. However, you should know that not everyone who shows up for jury duty actually make it to voir dire. Sometimes you get lucky and the case is settled before voir dire starts, or a full jury is selected before they ever call your name, and I like that when it happens. The court gets their jury, my duty's fulfilled, I go home, and I get my small check from the court a few days later for showing up. I don't have to worry about getting called to jury duty again for another few years. But let's assume you don't get lucky, and you have to go through voir dire. If you want to get out of jury duty, this is your last chance to get out of being a juror. They will once again ask if anyone has standard acceptable reasons to not serve on a jury, which I covered earlier. The crux of my strategy to not serve on a jury is that you are trying to get lawyers on one side or the other. You want someone to disqualify you. You want to communicate in such a way that they say to themselves, no way we want this guy or gal on the jury. He or she will be bad for our case. And I've gotten good at this over the years. First, when I appear for jury duty, I wear casual, comfortable clothes, like this. I wear jeans and a comfortable shirt. I don't wear dress pants, no dress shirts, no dress shoes. I am not dressing to impress. I dress down as much as I can without looking like a total slob. This is a personal preference. It can work for you or against you, depending on the court case. You won't know what kind of case you might be on until you get to voir dire. My rationale is if I'm being forced to attend jury duty, I may as well be comfortable. There will be a short period of time when you, as a potential juror, are being watched by the lawyers because voir dire doesn't immediately start. But rest assured, the lawyers are watching you and forming first impressions of you and other juror candidates. They are taking mental inventory of your age, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic background, your posture, what job you might have, etc. I generally stay quiet and keep to myself to not draw any more attention to myself than necessary. I'm not trying to be friendly or socialize with anyone. I put out sour vibes that I don't want to be here for jury duty. And that is how I set myself up from the outset. I am an unwilling juror. I put out negative vibes because I have been forced to attend. I will do what I have to do and nothing more. How I have avoided being selected as a juror is allowing my preconceived notions and inner biases to come out. For that session, I allow myself to be a cranky, crusty, opinionated, judgmental person. This is not hard for me because I am cranky and irritable when I have to get up early in the morning, especially to attend court. I make no effort to portray myself as a friendly, fair, or impartial juror. Lawyers are looking for fair, impartial jurors because if they find a juror that leans or is biased too heavily to one side or another of a potential case, a lawyer on the opposing side will disqualify them. Remember, if you don't want to be a juror, you have to be disqualified by someone, but you won't know until the very end when the jury is announced. The goal is to be biased and lean far to one side of a case or the other. You will be disqualified by one of the lawyers from serving. And while that sounds easy, it can be harder than you might expect. Through our sense of social norms, responsibility, upbringing, and our own moral and ethical sensibilities, most of us learn to be on our best behavior and restrain our worst impulses. Most of us try to be decent and fair human beings because we have been taught and conditioned to do this, to get along in society. It can be very hard to turn that part of yourself off in voir dire. But this is exactly why I was selected to be on a jury when I was 21. I was too nice, I was too accommodating, I was too fair. I was ignorant, and I didn't know any better at that time. In voir dire, this is when I allow my internal guardrails to come down. I let the unpleasant side of me come out. Now, that doesn't mean I suddenly transform into a
crazy, angry lunatic spouting off profanity
and making all kinds of outrageous statements. It's not like that. But it does mean I will allow my preconceived notions, biases, and opinions to come out when questioned. I will indulge and share my biases, feelings, and opinions of certain issues when asked. For example, some cases may have made the news or on social media, and if I can truthfully say I have seen a news story or social media story about the case of the parties, I will. If asked, and it's true, I will admit that a news story or social media story has affected my opinion about the case. I can admit to this because it's hard to be totally impartial when you read any news story, as far as I'm concerned. Lawyers don't want to hear that a potential juror has been tainted and biased by social media or news reports. If I don't want to serve as a juror, I absolutely want to give the impression I have been tainted by social media and news reports. Now let's talk about criminal cases. I have strong conceived notions about criminal cases, especially when it comes to property or violent crimes. This is a general statement. I tend to believe that prosecutors don't prosecute unless there is a good reason and there's something criminal that happened. In my own life, I have been a victim of crime several times, and I hate it. They have been a violation, they're invasive experiences. I've been burglarized several times over the years, I've had property stolen from my car, and I've dealt with deadbeat tenants and less desirable members of society over the years. I'm also sensitive to scammers, which is one reason why my YouTube channel has several videos about scams. I dislike all the news reports of rampant looting that occurs throughout the US. Based on my past history and personal experiences, I have a huge bias against criminal defendants. There's no secret about that. Criminal defense lawyers find out about me very quickly. On top of all that, I've never done drugs, never smoked, I don't vape, I rarely drink, and dislike addictions of any kind. So I'm not particularly sympathetic, but believe it or not, I could still get selected as a juror for a criminal case trial if I'm not vigilant. The truth of the matter is that lawyers know that everyone has preconceived notions and biases. What they're looking for in jurors is those jurors that can set aside those biases. I want to give the lawyers the impression that I am set and stern in my biases. If I communicate using an even-keeled, soft-spoken, calm voice, they may follow up and ask questions to try to figure out if I can set aside those biases to be fair and impartial. When I was 21, I spoke in an even-keeled, calm voice. Unbeknownst to me, it was my undoing. I was forced to be on a jury despite my reasons that I told them that I shouldn't be on a jury. I don't speak that way anymore to lawyers if I don't want to be on a jury. When I want to convey a strong message, I will emote through how I speak, the tone and conviction of my voice, and the body language and hand gestures I use. Bottom line, I will be very biased and opinionated in Voir Dire. It is easy and natural for me to be biased in certain situations and issues. However, there are many court cases that involve civil matters. There is a huge variety of situations where a civil lawsuit can occur. My biases will be different depending on the situation and first impressions. To me, it's easier to have strong biases and opinions in criminal matters than civil matters. Civil cases are trickier to get out of than criminal cases, but my general strategy is still the same. I'm going to take off my fair and impartial hat and put on my biased and judgmental hat. I'm going to become a crankier, crustier, judgmental, opinionated version of myself to the degree that I can do it honestly. Being forced to get up in the morning to go to court makes it easier for me to do this. Many times the lawyers will ask juror candidates if they have been involved or know someone that has been in a similar situation as the lawsuit, and if so, to what degree were you involved? Or if you had heard about the case or know about the parties in the case. If I can truthfully say that I have some related interests or knowledge of the case in the news or social media, I will certainly raise my hand and say yes. I will also say that it influences my opinion on the case because nearly every news story I come across, I have an opinion one way or another. I am looking for biases within myself that I can bring out. For example, I am generally a proponent of the little guy. I don't like it when big companies bully or take unfair advantage of the little guy. If a case involves a big company, I am predisposed against them because there is no shortage of big companies taking advantage of small customers. Another thing I'm sensitive to is frivolous lawsuits, or when the legal system is unfairly being used by one party to get something they don't deserve. There are a lot of dumb lawsuits that shouldn't be in courts, and if I have an impression that it's a frivolous lawsuit, then I have a strong bias to side with the defendant. As I said earlier, there are so many situations that can come up with a civil lawsuit. It's not as clear as with a criminal case where you're dealing with a prosecutor versus a criminal defendant. But in almost every case, I can generally find a strong opinion or personal bias that I can truthfully express even with civil cases. I am looking for something in a potential case that gets under my skin or annoys me. If I'm asked, I will communicate what I think to the lawyers in the hopes that someone will disqualify me. There are certainly no guarantees that you will never serve on a jury. However, there is a lot you can say in voir dire to stack the odds in your favor so that you can be disqualified from serving as a juror.